Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 347. This one is a themed episode.
That's right. We are on a themed episode, which means we're going to be talking about something kind of specific, a topic or something interesting to us. So today we're going to be talking about myths in reselling as of right now, what people kind of maybe wrongly believe about reselling. So we're going to try and debunk those. But make sure that if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit that bell notification. If you're listening on a podcast, make sure you're follow and subscribed, however that works on wherever you're getting your podcast from, because we release every single week, and our themed episodes are like this, where we cover something maybe like shipping or taxes or something like that. And then on the other weeks, we do our update episodes where we talk about what we're buying out at garage sales and thrift stores and what's going on in the reselling world. So make sure to come on over and hit that like, subscribe, bell notification. But Orlando, today we're talking about myths, man.
The and we haven't done one of these in a while, right? Every once in a while we do these, and I really do think I titled it 10 Myths About the Current Resale Revolution, and I do think we are on the cusp of a brand new era in reselling. I think a lot of things have come into play that have changed things. I mean, you think about when we started the podcast, there was no live selling. That didn't exist. Or I don't think it did. There was no Whatnot. There was actually no Poshmark. There was no AI. There was no promoted listings. There's a lot of things that didn't exist, right? And now they exist, and there's good and the bad. And I thought, let's talk about the myths, right? Because a lot of people have misconceptions about where reselling is going. And Mike and I think we're agreed on this, that reselling isn't going anywhere. It may get difficult in certain aspects, but it may get easier in other aspects. And there's so much that can be done with reselling. So we kind of wanted to take this time to debunk these myths. And the first one is this idea that AI will replace resellers. What are your thoughts on that one, Mike, before I jump in?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think there's a genuine concern. I had my students at school, I'm a teacher, I had them reading an article about AI music and art. And Goldman Sachs had come out with a study, or their report from their expertise, essentially saying that they're estimating that AI is going to replace up to 300 million jobs worldwide. That was one of the facts that came from that study, or one of their opinion pieces. And I do think there is genuine concern that AI is going to revolutionize and change a lot of industries. And I do think it will probably cost some jobs. However, I think what a lot of people don't realize is it's a very powerful tool, right? In the same way that like the internet didn't replace jobs, it just kind of changed the way a lot of jobs happen. I think AI is going to be, in some ways, could be the same. And I look at something like being a teacher. I know there's a lot of people who are worried like, hey, teachers are going to be replaced because AI can do this. But the reality is there has to be that human element, that human touch. And that's what, good teachers or good resellers using AI is a very powerful tool. I mean, think about it. We've talked about the fact that places like Goodwill, Salvation Army, if they can capitalize on AI, that can make it a lot more challenging for resellers to source, because if they're able to run items through something that's just scanning and quickly evaluating whether or not it can sell on the website, how much it should be priced on the floor, that can make things like sourcing at thrift stores more difficult. But things like, having local connections or finding deals on Facebook Marketplace or going to garage sales, nobody's got an AI that's going to do those things. It still takes a person to physically go and find those deals. And so even if certain aspects of reselling get more challenging, like maybe sourcing from thrift stores, it's certainly not going to completely replace what it is that we do. And I even think that's going to be the case on something like eBay. Like you could have said like, hey, something like Terapeak could destroy reselling because then people can't just put whatever offers they want. Well, the reality is like the technology might make it so things are going to like stabilize price wise. People can see what things have sold for in the past. That's going to, be a tool that resellers can use to inform their pricing structures now. I think it's the same thing with AI. Like AI is a powerful tool, could be a tool for helping us with listings, could be a tool for helping us with descriptions, could be a tool for all types of things, even on something like the eBay platform. But it's still going to take that human touch. It's going to take a little bit of creativity and work from a physical person who can make things happen. So I do think it's going to play an impact on the world in general and more specifically in reselling. However, I don't think that this fear of like, hey, computers are just going to overnight or robots are going to replace what we do. No, I mean, somebody's going out there and needs to be at that garage sale at 5:30 in the morning digging through boxes trying to find that, Nintendo game. So that's not going away.
Yeah, and I wanna just stop here for a moment too, and just kind of make this practical, right? Because sometimes you listen to podcasts and it's very theoretical and philosophical, but if you're not embracing AI, you are definitely behind the curve when it comes to anything, but even reselling, right? There's so many things. So let me give you guys some examples. I mean, the easiest one right now is Google Lens, right? The fact that Google Lens uses AI to find items and what they sell for. I would say I use Google Lens far more than I ever use the eBay app. Like when I'm out and about and I spot something that I don't recognize, I just use it. Like I use it every single time for Google Lens. It's so much faster, so much efficient. It's so much more efficient than going on eBay and like trying to put keywords and trying to find that. And I know eBay even has an image search, I think. I don't know. I haven't used it in a long time because it just wasn't that great. On top of that, like there's other things. I really do think what is going away is the people that make courses or write like reselling books. Like that is done, right? I mean, if you want, you can go on ChatGPT and say, hey, can you write me a manual? Maybe I shouldn't share this because maybe Mike and I want to drop one. I'm just joking. But be like, hey, can you write me a manual on, what to do to find good products at garage sales based on the research that is out there, right? And it'll put something together for you. Now, I will say, if Mike and I wrote one, we would bring in the human element and tips and tricks that we have learned on our own, and which would be different than what AI would produce. But I got to tell you, the stuff that's out there is pretty great. If you want to learn a certain niche, like you go, hey, I really want to learn more about rain spooner based on the research out there. Can you give me a 10-point outline on what are the best things to look out for when it comes to rain spooner Hawaiian shirts? Right. So there's a lot. I mean, there's even the more practical one where you see all these garage sales and you can put them all on the list and you can just put them in AI and say, hey, can you give me the best possible route so I'm not wasting time going from place to place and I want to end up at breakfast here at the end, right? There's just so much out there. I know people on our Discord have talked about that even though eBay has its own AI listing tool where, it'll give you the description, that even using like ChatGPT or Claude or the other ones, they'll give it certain parameters of like, this is what I want my description to have. And they'll just like create their own AI. And whenever they have listings, they'll just throw the product in there and they'll spit it out and they'll just copy paste and put it on their listing. So there's a lot to be done. So I would say embrace it instead of go like, oh man, we're done. It's over. I agree with you, Mike. The ability to network, the ability to negotiate, the ability to find deals, the ability to spot things out. The tools will just help you, but still resellers it's the knowledge base that you gain over time with using AI that's going to allow you to be successful. This next one, I'm kind of up in the air about this one because I there's a part of me that goes, I'm not sure if how true this myth is, but I also think there's a valid myth here. So the idea that the golden age of reselling is over. And if you're wondering what we're talking about that period from, I would say, March 2020 till, I don't know, maybe the end of 2021. Like that was peak time. I mean, there were sales never to be replicated like that, at least not in the last 2 years. But I don't know if it's over. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike? Do you think the golden era of reselling is over? Do you think there's a possibility that we'll hit one again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say golden era because that was such a short period of time. It's more like a fluke situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you kind of had a lot of things going at the same time. One, you had a pretty strong economy going into the start of 2020, so a lot of employment. And then you had a lot of unemployment happening, so people had free time, they were on their computers, but things like unemployment benefits were way up, plus you had a lot of stimulus checks going out. So it was like a lot of people had extra money, which is a weird thing to say, right? Like, 'cause it's such a weird situation. A lot of people lost jobs or like were home from their jobs for a while. And so it was a bizarre situation. But the reality was people had time on their hands because a lot of people weren't going into an office and there were stimulus checks coming in. And if they were unemployed, unemployment rates were so much higher, the values they were getting. And so it did create this bizarre situation where if you had inventory, your inventory was moving. Now, it did get a little bit more challenging to get inventory. I remember for a while there during 2020, I mean, there was just no garage sales. And if you were finding garage sales, it was like appointment only. And you had to a lot of places were doing the social distancing and the masks, and you had to come only in certain increments of time. And so there was a challenge for sourcing. So I don't know if you were maybe a new reseller, but even before 2020, I remember when we first started the podcast in that, probably 2018 timeframe, we were talking about Chuck or Gary Vee, right? Gary Vee made the comment that, if you're not making it right now, like it's not a brag to say like, look at how much money my business is bringing in right now, because it was kind of like money was free flowing. I think what makes this kind of a myth is those exact situations might not be replicated in the same way, but the economies always go in cycles. And so as long as there's a healthy system in place, there are going to be times when there's ups and there's going to be times when there's down. And I think a lot of times people go into doomsday either direction, things are going to never get better, or to go the other route and they think things are always going to get better. And there's kind of just this ebb and flow over time. I think there's an upward trajectory. And so I think when we experience downturns in economy, that could last anywhere from 3 to 7 years. It really just depends on what's going on with the economy and interest rates and inflation. And there's so many things at play, but I'm confident that we're going to see a return to the economy. That could be this year, that could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. I mean, who knows when, but there's going to be a time when it's like, man, this is the golden time. I mean, think about all the people who bought houses 10, 20 years ago, and it's like, man, that was the time to buy houses. But then also there was the big crash, and it was like, this was the worst time to have bought a house. And so it's just an ebb and flow. And so I think if you take a more holistic look and you kind of zoom out macro, view the economy at a macro level instead of just micro level in short increments of time, you realize, hey, there's going to be a increase in the economy again at some point. And if you're positioned to take advantage of that, great. And the reality is, we've talked about this before too, even during downturn economies, that's when the biggest shift of wealth happens. And so for resellers, there's a lot of resellers when the economy starts to tank, they're able to capitalize on that, make some money, make purchases. You can buy inventory way cheaper a lot of times when markets really drop. And then you can turn around and make a lot of profit on it when that market comes back.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer that the golden era applies to different times to different people, right? I mean, even right now, this whole last year, I had been talking about how my sales were low and things weren't great. And there's other people that have just scaled, right? They've gone from, I just started being part-time. I went full-time. I paid off my house. I paid off my cars, paid off my college loans. They've experienced their own golden era. And so don't get caught up in this thing. You watch a YouTube and they're saying that things are slow. You're watching the podcast, you're like, oh man, I guess I should just, not apply myself as such. No, that's not true. Because everybody has their own experience of reselling. I think overall there is a trend, when things do slow down and when things do speed up. But at the same time, there's opportunity now. There are plenty of people right now that are making more money now in reselling than they ever made. Actually, they may be even making more money than they made in 2020 and 2021. And so don't get discouraged and think, the golden era is over. That golden era could be for you this year. While everybody is saying, things have kind of calmed down a little bit. No, that you could be thriving. And so don't let that guide the way you run your business. Now, this next one, I kind of find it interesting because usually when Gary Vee is saying stuff, he's saying it because he's trying to get everybody to go along, and then it happens, right? He did that with the garage sales. He did that with the Pokemon cards. He did that with NFTs. And now he's doing it with live selling. So what is being said now is live selling is going to be the biggest way to make money, or maybe will end up being the only way to make good money. And I'm not sure if that's the case. I do think there's a lot of money to be made in live reselling, but I also believe there's a lot of time to be lost, and I also believe there's a lot of money to be lost. And so you got to be very careful about it, because, when it comes to live reselling, it requires constant energy. You have to be going all the time, right? Not only when you are preparing your items or shipping your items, the entire time that you are performing. And so I'm not 100% sold on live reselling as the way of the future. Now, one day, if it's not, then we can get some AI to clip this and show how Orlando is wrong. But I am not sure. I don't know. I'm more of like, I think it's a fad right now. But I don't know. Where are you at on this, Mike?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, it's funny, we've mentioned Gary Vee twice in one episode, and it's been years since we've talked about Gary Vee. Since we talked about him,
yeah.
But I think you're right. Like, there are a lot of people who, if you're just looking like at a quick glance, it could be like, man, this person is always on the cutting edge, and they kind of foresee, they're like a prophet, they foresee where things are going. But then if you kind of take a step back and analyze it a little bit more, a lot of times you realize, hey, this person is using a lot of their influence in order to push things into the direction they want it to go. So rather than like foreseeing where things are going, they're trying to manipulate things in that direction because they have a financial stake there. And so what Gary Vee's financial stake is on this, I don't know. Maybe he is trying to be prophetic, and maybe he's
like the top investor and whatnot. But
right. I mean, exactly. Like, we don't know, right? So that's one of those things where I feel like you got to be careful. I think that this was like the situation with the what were they called? The ETF? No, the
NFTs.
NFTs, that's
NFTs,
right. Yeah. The NFTs. I think that was like a lot of that, right? Like, a lot of people were pushing the hype for it, and they were the ones that made all the money, almost like a pyramid scheme. Like, the people at the top, people getting all the hype. Everybody needs to get in this, or even like the basketball cards for a while there.
Yep.
I feel like when you push that, the people who are pushing it have something to gain from it. That being said, I mean, it's always hard to tell what's going to happen with technology, but I can't imagine it replacing our current system.
Have you seen his latest video?
No,
have you seen
his
latest video?
No.
He had one where he said that garage sales will be live streamed. So the ability to go out and like source will no longer be available because people are just going to do garage sales from their house.
I think it'd have to be like generationally. Like think about things like Zelle and Cash App and those things, right? Like, someone can Zelle you some money or whatever, Venmo. If I go to a garage sale that's got some younger people, like young millennials or younger running it, no problem. They'll take Venmo, they'll take Zelle. But most of the garage sales I'm going to, that's not even an option, right? And so it's the same thing. Like, think about how long Zelle and Venmo have been around, and it's been transformative. Like, it has changed banking in a lot of ways, but it hasn't like completely changed like what I do as a reseller. And I think the same thing is true. Like, if you could do that, where it's like becomes an easier thing, there's a platform for live streaming garage sales. I don't even know how that'd work, because think about something like Facebook Marketplace. Like, it's already a tough enough thing if you're in a small market trying to get the right buyer to buy your item. That it's not, I don't know if it'd work really well for a garage sale, but you might get a handful of people who jump on and they're like, yes, I'm doing this technology. But I think it would take like 10 years before it would reach critical mass, if it was popular for that long without hitting any hiccups and other issues. Because you've got to convince almost an entire generation to adopt the technology, to use it, to trust it, and then for it to become the new norm. And I think we're just so far off from something like that.
Yeah, no, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I understand the passion. I would argue that Whatnot has grown, but there's a part of me that goes, I'm not sure, because eBay, what is going on with eBay? Like, even still, it's been 2 years, eBay. You promised us live streaming, and it has not happened. And maybe because eBay has seen the light and gone, don't know if this is the most profitable thing for us. I mean, that's one of it. Like, I would say the revenue that eBay would get from people going live stream would drop immensely, right? Because I would say all the time, I sell something for $30-$40 on eBay. I might sell it on Whatnot for $10 to $20 on a good day, right? So you can only imagine the work that would take for eBay if everybody started live streaming, right? So that would take a lot of money, right? They would have to make sure their servers are working fine. They'd have to be able to, carry everybody that's streaming at the same time. And then on top of that, understanding that the margins are super low, right? That instead of people having, 20 sales for $40 a day, they're having maybe 100 sales at, I don't know, $20, whatever it is, but it's a lot less. So it's a lot more work, a lot more infrastructure that eBay would have to invest for it to be successful. So I'm not sure live reselling is the way to go. I do think it's something that should be part of your arsenal and reselling, part of what you do. Make sure you always have it ready. That's one of the things Mike and I have talked about. Whatnot is something that we like, because if we ever end up, buying out a storage unit or buying out a huge bulk thing like we did before, and we just want to sell all that stuff quickly, like the opportunity is there. But I would say keep building your eBay store, keep refining what you pick up, because live selling, even though it's an important part of the reselling economy, I don't know how permanent it is. All right, hey, before we move on, great tool that's out there that has helped people. And actually in the Discord, we're having a discussion about this because people are running into issues with QuickBooks and so on. And it's My Reseller Genie. So My Reseller Genie is bookkeeping software by resellers for resellers. And we're actually giving away a free month for the month of February. And so if you leave comments, we will at the end of the month kind of do a random pick of all the people that have commented on our YouTube, and you will get one free month. But if you need to get started right away, and I don't know what the odds are on you winning, you can get a first month for 15% off of My Reseller Genie by using our code Pure Hustle. Again, using our code Pure Hustle, you'll get 15% off the first month. This is going to allow you to import all your eBay data, know your cost of goods, track your inventory. It'll help you get a profit and loss statement if you need it for whatever reason. So check out My Reseller Genie. All right, this next one, Mike. The market is too saturated. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but where do you land on this one?
Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to that like ebb and flow thing. I think part of it is a new generation. Like a lot of millennials have kind of taken on this. I mean, do you remember that game that was a bolo for a little bit, the Monopoly Millennials edition?
Oh yeah! Oh my goodness! Yes, I remember my car had 100 of them. Yes,
right. So there was I got one from you just as I thought it'd be a fun joke to like play. Anyways, I played it, and there's like a card in there that was like, you get a side hustle, and like that was like a chance card or whatever, and it's like you get an extra $200, and so they recognize even in that game almost as like a joke that like it is part of millennial culture to have a side hustle. And so there is some truth to the fact that there are a lot more people doing this than were doing it before. Like I can imagine like if you're somebody who's been reselling for like 30 years, 20 years, and you were doing it before social media was big, you were doing it back before there was all these, I mean, you didn't even have internet on phones back in the day, right? Like, so you had to you just had to know what inventory was good, or go home and check on and open up a computer, look and see, and then go back to the garage sale to buy stuff. And so if that was the market you're used to, and all of a sudden the internet comes in, sure, it absolutely changes things. And then this new cultural shift of, millennials jumping in, that changes things too. So yeah, if you're trying to compare, it's not apples to apples anymore. Like things are very different than they were 20, 30 years ago for resellers. That being said, there's also a lot more people buying resell. They're buying secondary goods than used to. It used to be a handful of people buying things on eBay if you were a collector, like I collect baseball cards or I collect whatever. Now, a lot of younger people are buying their clothes almost exclusively secondhand. And so is there saturation? Sure, but the market has also grown. And so it's never going back. And I think that's part of the thing we have to realize is like you can't sit here, going ahead and talking about the golden era, right? Like not just the 2020 time, but like back when there just wasn't the same kind of competition. And if you knew a niche really well and you could go out and source that stuff, like you were set because it was just a different world back then. Those days are gone. You've got more competition out for sure. And so just by the very nature of having more competition, there is going to be some saturation. Certain fields, like if you're like in used clothing, man, you really got to know what you're doing, or just be selling really, really cheap. You're putting items on and you just low profit margin per item, but you're selling a whole bunch of them. So there is profit to be made. Certain things are certainly going to be more saturated than they were before, but you also got to take the good with the bad on this. There's been a shift in the paradigm, right? Like there are now new people buying, there's more people selling. And so you've got to find new ways to make your way in this new world. So is there saturation? Yes. But with the myth of it's now too saturated, sure, if you're trying to say like, I want it to go back to 20 years ago, it's not going back. And it might be too saturated compared to then. But is it too saturated to be successful today? I don't think so.
Yeah, and let's keep it real. Whenever you get on these e-commerce bites comment section or the eBay forums, and there's people like, "Oh, I used to be able to sell this for so much, and I no longer can." Yeah, you're right. You should have adapted, right? That's the reality, right? That's what's causing you to have terrible sales. That's what's caused me to have terrible sales. right? I don't pick up Harley Davidson anymore because it's not as profitable as it used to be. Now, I could be like, the market's too saturated. Yes, that is true. The Harley Davidson market got saturated. But if I want to be successful as a reseller, right, there's other markets that have not been saturated, right? Trends come and go. And so there is plenty of opportunity out there. I find that a lot of the reasons I'm pointing to myself that, things are slow sometimes is just because you were comfortable in a certain way. You like sourcing a certain item. You're very acquainted with it. And then you saw other people and then you start getting upset about it, right? So remember Cricut? The crafting, like the printers and the cartridges. I remember I didn't even want to share that, right? On episode, I think it was like 3, right? I was like, oh, here's a bolo, but I don't know if we should talk about it. And now I'm like, I don't care. I'll share whatever is out there, because the reality is it's all based on geography, like what you can find in your area. It's all based on your knowledge base. It's all based on buyer demand. And this kind of leads to our next myth, the idea that reselling creators like the YouTubers, the podcasts are killing reselling. And I believe that is completely false. And the reason I say it's completely false is because, again, if you were comfortable and saying, hey, I just want to keep rinse and repeat the same thing for the next 20 years, then I think you can make that argument. But the reality is, even if those creators didn't exist, it's very possible that those items no one would have cared for anymore. Right? No one would have wanted to pick up. I think about slide rulers. I remember there was a point in time, those old vintage slide rulers, like you could pick those up and you could sell them for good money. And those weren't even talked about out on YouTube or anything. Every once in a while you hear somebody talk about it. That market died, right? Video games. I think regardless of whether reseller was talking about video games, that market would have shifted anyways. It doesn't matter. What I do think, and I'll stop talking until Mike can jump in here, is that it creates, actually what creators do is they create greater visibility about what people can purchase, right? Because not only are you watching this, going, hey, I can buy this and I can sell it for this much, but if you're a person that doesn't resell at all, you may have not known that you could go to eBay and get a discount on items. You may have not known that items that you're really looking for are actually out there and people are looking for these items. What I do think it does, it brings greater attention to all these different categories. To me, the more resellers there are, the more people will go to these platforms to buy goods. And I really think it's just, I don't know, you're just shifting the blame and trying to find somebody to blame instead of focusing on your own business.
Yeah, and I get the frustration. Like there are for sure lots of people, like I mentioned, if you were set in a position where you had it golden, like you knew items that nobody else knew about, and you were able to make a killing, and I don't want to say selfishly, because I mean that's the dream, right? Like you want that unfair advantage, you want to be competitive. If you didn't have competitors, you're the most competitive you can be. However, I mean, I get it. Like I would say that a lot of markets have been crushed by influencers, and a lot of times,
I disagree.
Not every time, but a lot of times, the markets are getting crushed. There's like two sides of it. Like one, it's like a lot of influencers are sharing stuff because it's already dead and gone. Like you kind of were saying.
That's true. That is true.
But the other side is there are a lot of people who want a little bit of fame. They want 5 minutes of fame. And so it's like, hey, if I find this bolo, if I find this thing, I'm going to blow this thing up right now and let everybody know about it so that I can get another 10,000 views on my YouTube channel, and I can get some more likes and subscribes, because for them that's the currency they're after, right? Like there are people for sure that the currency they're after is not so much, hey, how much money can I make on this reselling thing, but how many followers can I get? How big can I grow this social media thing? And so there are going to be some element of that for sure. But at the same time, you got to take the good with the bad. And I think that you can gain so much knowledge from what people have done, and then it helps everybody. And again, I'm a firm believer that most people are lazy. Not everyone, but most people are lazy. And so I could go to somebody right now and tell them, hey, you're struggling to pay your bills. Hey, give me 1 hour. I could teach you how to resell some stuff. We can get this figured out. And within a few months, you'd be able to pay this bill that you're struggling to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And they will say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And then they'll spend the next couple months complaining about how they can't pay their bills, right? So I think that sharing those things doesn't create the competition that some people think it does. But the nature of information is it's going to get out there because of our new system with, the internet, the way it's set up now. I get why some people say like, hey, if it wasn't for resellers on YouTube, Goodwill wouldn't know what they had. Well, I don't think that's true, because I think Goodwill has access to information, right? Like maybe we're making it easier for them in some ways to find certain items, but you can't stop what's coming. You can't stop the fact that you can easily look up items that they can do the work. They could look up on Terapeak. They could look it up on eBay. They can spend a little bit of time creating some specialists in their own company that do this and train people how to do it. And so I don't think that's what kills it, but there is an element. I mean, you've even had it yourself where, like you're trying to buy some items, you're getting them in your cart, and all of a sudden now it's on social media and it's like that market just tanked. Race to the bottom.
I've shifted on that a little bit though. I think it applies to retail arbitrage because the barrier of entry is pretty easy, right? If I go into a Target and I'm like, hey, there's this game here, you should pick it up. Like I think that's harder, and it's also harder because you're competing with bots, right? People that have bots are able to go through internet sites. But I would say in the secondary market, whether it be vintage clothing, vintage toys, whatever it may be, I don't believe that to be true at all. And even used clothing, and like you said, how many people are actually going to execute on the advice, right? If we did a episode where like, hey, 10 items to look for when you're out thrifting, how many people are actually going to go out thrifting and actually look for those specific items? Now, there might be some that will think about something because they watch the video and then they come across it like, oh yeah, I remember watching this on Pure Hustle podcast. But the percentages are super small. And I don't have data on it, but if I did, I'm pretty sure it'd be less than 1%. I think about even these Patreon groups, right? We have our own Discord. Tech and Sports has like the biggest, I believe, out there when it comes to reselling on eBay, but it's not even massive, right? It's not huge, right? We're not talking about, I've been in crypto Discords. And in those crypto Discords, there's like 300,000, 500,000 people, whether on the Discord or on the Telegram. There's nothing like that in the reselling game, not even close, right? You may have one that is 2,000 to 3,000, but that's it. So to me, it's like, no, there's no way. And to me, and I always want to let people know, like, again, I've said this over and over again. I do think YouTube creators bring awareness to reselling. They help out far more than they ever hinder. And it just brings greater attention to an opportunity for people to go, you know what? I think I'm gonna start thinking about either sourcing, or I'm gonna just buy stuff on eBay because I'm finding that people are picking up what I'm looking for. I don't know. I just don't buy it. I think these creators, the larger creators, are given, a hard time about it. But think about it. Even the largest YouTube creators out there, I don't know, Harry Tornado has 400K, Reezy Resells has like 500,000, Craigslist Center has maybe 500,000. I haven't looked in a long time. But even then, that is nothing compared to like the huge world of YouTube that is out there. All right, hey, before we move into our hustles of the week, wanted to share that if you ever want to follow us, we are on social media, Pure Hustle Podcast on all platforms. We are Pure Hustle Cast on X. You could always shoot us an email at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com, purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. We always love hearing your hustle of the week. If you have any questions, maybe if you want to send us audio, that's always appreciated. And I also want to let you know that if you are listening to this podcast and you have not jumped on over to YouTube to hit that subscribe button, I plead with you to do so, because in the end, 10,000 is going to open a lot of opportunities for us. And so we're almost there. We've been kind of lurking in the early 9,000s for like a long time, lower 9,000 for a long time. So if you jump on over, and we do appreciate, though, we have thousands upon thousands of downloads every month. So podcast is what we do, but we'd love for you to come on over, check us on YouTube, at least get to know what the faces look like. Maybe if you want to do that, that are behind this podcast. And as always, grateful for all of you that leave us iTunes reviews. I just want to share a couple of these this time because it's always good to know. And we're in the 800 club. We are the largest reselling podcast, most reviewed reselling podcast out there. But if I'd love to get to 1,000 here within a couple of months of reviews. So let me share a couple here. We have here. This one is from Lafayette 11. Says consistently helpful reselling information. Says I started listening to the show when I was first started reselling over a year ago. These guys are consistent, seem like nice people, and I always learn a thing or two each podcast. Thank you for your time and working on this show. Really appreciate that. And then another one here. This comes from the CDC. Says the best and most informative reselling podcast out there. So really appreciate that. Come on over. If we're at 4.8, I want to get us back to 4.9. Okay, so come on over. Let us know why you love the podcast and give us those 5 stars. And thank you, everyone that supports us on the Patreon, because the Patreon does allow Mike and I to continue producing free content. We have had 437 free episodes appear on the podcast without a paywall. So if you haven't come on over to patreon.com/podcast for $5.55 a month. You get to support us. And not only that, jump on our Discord that has all kinds of amazing resellers. And I got to tell you, every time I go in there, I'm always learning something new. And I don't know if there's a reselling outside of free reselling Patreon out there that is cheaper than ours or more affordable than ours. So come on over for $5.55 a month. Yeah. All right, let's go to some hustles of the week here.
Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking hustle of the week. Yeah, hustle of the week. All right, our first one comes from Endlessly Curious from the Discord. So I don't know why, but people like leaving spare donut tires laying around in parking lots and on the side of the road. I have probably sold 7 or 8 over the years, and I found 2 this month alone of the same brand and almost the same size. Anyway, donut spare tires sell for more than regular tires for some reason. Even a fairly used one will catch you $80, and I have sold a couple that were over $200 that had not been used and for newer vehicles. I pick them up at garage sales or wherever, whenever I see them for shipping. I wrap them in bubble wrap and then a thick contractor's trash bag. Yeah, that's such a good idea. I mean, there have been times where I've had to buy another spare donut for my car, and there was one time I was considering actually just replacing my spare with like a full-size tire because I had to replace one of my tires, and I was like, it'd only be like an extra $100 to just replace it with a full size, but it wouldn't fit in the trunk of my car, the full size with the space where the spare would fit. And spares are expensive, and so that's an interesting thing that people leave them. I would imagine that it has something to do with them doing that. I guess if you go to a normal tire shop, they're going to take your tire off your hands, like one that you don't want. Maybe you have to pay like a little bit of a fee for that, but and if you're changing a tire, like, I don't know why you would leave the spare instead of putting it back in your car, because again, those are expensive. But maybe people don't know what they have. Like, I'll give you an example. So one of the most expensive example. Go ahead. One of the most expensive pieces of glass on your car is actually like the little windows, like
yes,
like right in the back, like towards like, you got those little tiny windows. Those a lot of times are the most expensive because they're like special, they're unique, they don't make as many of them. And people, when I've seen it time and time again, where people are trying to break into their car at like a grocery store or something because they lock their keys in and they decide, I'm just going to break a window. I did that one time. I broke a window to get into my car because it was going to be cheaper than getting somebody out there, and I just replaced it myself. But they break the little window because they think, this must be the cheapest one because it's the smallest. And I think some people might leave their donuts on the side of the road or in parking lots because they're like, I'll just get a new one. I don't feel like putting this back in my car. I don't know. It's kind of bonkers to me.
But that's what happened to me. I ended up in an accident 4 years ago on the way to the airport. I was about to go on a trip with my family, and I got in an accident. And we're in the middle of the freeway, and I'm looking at my plane flight, and I'm like, I'm going to miss my flight. Like, I got to get out of here. And so I wasn't at fault. So the cop showed up. Highway Patrol was there. They wrote up the tickets. And I remember he was using my spare tire to kind of like be a barrier to guide traffic. And I for a moment, I was like, I probably need to get that, before I go to the airport. But I'm like, it's easy to find one of those. Probably super cheap. And I just left so I can make my flight. And then when I got back, I started looking it up, and I was, $130 for the spare tire? That's crazy, because not only the tire, but like the rim, and then there was a connecting piece that I needed. And so, yes, those are definitely bolos. If you see them, you never know. People might just want the wheel that you put the tire on, right? They may have the tire, but yeah, there's money to be made on those. I still regret, and I still don't have one. I've gone 4 years without a spare tire on my car. But luckily, I have not had to. Well, I say that now, and who knows what will happen next week. All right. This is from Fran Taylor in our Discord. Actually, no, not Fran Taylor. Fran Taylor. Oh, man, I got to find out who wrote this. So we're going to be talking about some mid-century barware that sells for good money. Let me just go into our Discord. We're going to go on our Discord live here. I wish we could like screen share this so people know what it looks like. But I'm going over here right now and going to find out who wrote this. But we get so many Hustle of the Week, bolos, tips, shipping. Like, you definitely should check it out. So this is from Death Pile Dave. And I think we had some from Death Pile Dave a little while ago, maybe even last week. So Death Pile Dave says, Fran Taylor is one of the pioneers of MCM, mid-century modern barware. GayFad was her brand. She started a business with $30 in the 1940s and took it to several million by the mid-50s. It shut down in 1962. A couple bought the original GayFad store location in Lancaster, Ohio in 2022. They're selling custom GayFad barware out of there once again. Picked up a piece at an estate sale for $5. The store that's selling these items again, they bought the rare Fran Taylor piece from the estate sale that was purchased for $5 for their free museum. He listed it at $185 as, you know, he was saying, hey, I tried to research but couldn't find any similar comps, and accepted an offer at $125 plus ship. So not only do we got a bolo, but we got a Hustle of the Week. And again, it's one of those things that, you know, you got to look for the advantage, right? I looked at these pieces. I would have never picked up these pieces. I will now, right? So maybe we're killing the market here, but I'm pretty sure they're hard to find. So nice work there, Death Pile Dave.
Nice. All right, our next one comes from a someone who's no stranger to the podcast. We got Tim the Slim from our Discord. So he says, turns out sterling silver is expensive. Who would have thought? Nice. 768 grams, $10 in a chest at a sale, and they let me into 1 hour and 45 minutes early. No early birds though, right? That's a good point. Sometimes they say no early birds, but you might get in. Sold a lot of sterling silver flatware. It was a Hallmark ballad monogrammed, and it was sold for $599 plus 99 cents in shipping. Good grief, that's insane. From $10 to $600, and yeah, I'm sure that there's an element of it being sterling silver, but also the brand probably mattered in the type that it was, because I'm sure that's more than just simply the cost of the silver itself. There, I don't think sterling silver 768 grams. I'd have to look up that price. So it looks like I lost Orlando right now, so he'll be back on in just a moment.
All right, Tim the Slim, you got your shout out one more time. It wouldn't be a normal episode without Tim the Slim. But hey, everyone, really appreciate you sharing Hustle of the Week. And if you have not yet, I implore you on social media, like, make sure to tag us, Pure as a Podcast, hashtag Hustle of the Week. Always love being able to share from Instagram, or if you do it on X, wherever it is, or shoot us an email about your Hustle of the Week. Always appreciated. Again, it motivates us, it helps us, it keeps us moving. And so always grateful for the opportunities to hear the wins out there, because people are always winning when it comes to reselling. Yeah. Okay, but we have our own Hustle of the Week here. So do you want me to go first? Or do you want to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I had mentioned this haul already, and so I just kind of want to just share about it again, just so people understand. So I picked up a bunch of Nightmare Before Christmas items, like toys and memorabilia and all these different things. And I remember in the negotiation, they wanted 200, and I actually threw out 75, and they looked at me like I was crazy. But then, like, we bonded through having some commonalities, knowing different people, and they're like, all right, whatever, we'll do. I think I said, all right, I'll do 100. And they're like, no, I'm gonna give it to you for 75. And then I was like, at least let me pay you 80. So I paid them. And I always tell people, when you're at garage sales, wherever situation you're in and you're sourcing, if you're able to make back your money on at least 25% of your items, you're doing pretty well, right? But if you can make it back on one, you're really golden. And so I ended up selling a Nightmare Before Christmas watch, and it was great because I sold it for $90 plus ship, right? So I paid $75 for everything, which means I'm pretty sure I paid less than $3 for this item. And to sell it for 90, it paid for the entire haul, and I was kind of happy. I see that as also the week, because it takes care of everything. Now, I have made a ton of money on this haul. I've made probably $600 to $700 at the least, but this was a Nightmare Before Christmas limited edition Jack Skellington resin watch, and it sold for $91 plus ship. So that is my hustle of the week.
Nice. Mine's not a super expensive one, but I thought it was interesting. So the last time we did a themed episode, and I think it was the hustle of the week, it might have just been something I was talking about. Maybe it was a update episode, but either way, a couple of episodes ago, I talked about selling a CCTV camera on locally, and I had a couple, or not camera, but lens.
Oh yeah.
And I had a couple of them, and I said that they had sat for a while, and one ended up selling locally. Like just a couple of days ago, I sold the other one on eBay, right? And those have sat there forever. So I had one sell locally, one sell on eBay. And so not a huge sale, like probably like $30-$40 somewhere around there. But I picked up both of these for probably a couple dollars each, and between the two of them have made well over $100. And it's just interesting to me. I don't know if like there was an update in software somewhere, and so you know how it is with like YouTube and influencers, kind of like we're talking about. So some people might have been trying to figure out what's the best way to replace this, or what camera should I use, and somebody might have mentioned these lenses on a video, and then boom, there they go. Like people start searching for them, and then they sell. So it's kind of intriguing to me that these both went, but yeah, kind of glad to have those gone and realize, hey, I didn't actually make a bad purchase after all.
Isn't it nice? That's kind of how I felt. You know, Super Bowl Sunday just passed, but I picked up a whole bunch of Kansas City Chiefs jerseys, and I was like, oh man, I kind of overpaid for these. But no, you know, at least they made it to Super Bowl. The reality is Mike and I right now don't know who won. What's your prediction? Because we're recording this before the Super Bowl. Who's going to win?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I'm kind of rooting for I mean, I don't really watch football. I haven't watched even one game this year. But I don't love the Chiefs, so I guess I'm in spite rooting for the Eagles.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of... Yeah, I kind of like the Eagles. I kind of, you know, we'll see what happens. But it's just kind of funny. I want to see how this lands after the podcast. So let us know. Let us know in the comments. Hey, all right. So hustle of the week. If you ever want to send it to us, email it to us, tag us on Instagram. And if you're in the Discord, right, that's the easiest way, because there's a whole hustle of the week channel. All right, let's continue talking about some of these myths. We just got a few more here. And so this one, and we've talked about this many times, and I think there's a lot of videos that are made about this, and unfortunately, I don't know if they're true. It's the fact that the more you list, the more money you make.
I think there's truth to it.
I think there's truth to it, but and I know where you're going to go with it, but I think there's this belief like, hey, if I just list a certain amount of items every single day, and I up my listings to a certain amount, that it's just going to create more sales. But there's some catches to that. What's those catches, Mike?
Well, I mean, it goes back to that idea of like, if you work harder, it's going to work out for you, as long as the work you're doing is good, meaningful work, right? Like just saying like, I'm going to work harder, so I'm going to make everything take twice as long, or I'm going to just go move rocks in the backyard for no reason. Like, yeah, you're working hard, but that's not going to be beneficial. It's the same thing with this. Like that doesn't take away from the fact that hard work is very beneficial to you. Like it will benefit you. If you work harder in your job, you're going to make more money. If you list more quality items, you're going to sell more quality items. The caveat, though, is I think some people hear this and they think, well, that just means I can list junk. And I don't think people take it to the most extreme. They're not just like, all right, well, I've got 100 paper clips on my desk, so I'm going to do 100 listings of different paper clips. Like most people aren't doing, like they don't believe it to that level, but they kind of just think that like most listings are created equal. Like as long as I list something that's decent, it's going to help me out. And again, there's still some truth to that. Like if there's a 1 in a million chance that an item is going to sell, that's an extreme number. But if I list more of those items, I'm more likely to sell one of them, right? Like, so there is some truth to it, but yeah, you can't just list more and make more money. You got to list more of the right stuff, but you will make more money if you list more of the right stuff. There's no doubting that.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's the quality stuff, right? I mean, I had my moments where I didn't have quality stuff. I just kind of was like, I got to list stuff, and it didn't increase my money. And that happens to a lot of people. A lot of people aren't careful in their sourcing. They go out and they don't pick up stuff that has great sell-through rate, or they pick up stuff that was hot maybe when they watched the YouTube video, but by the time they listed it, it was no longer hot, and they could have listed all day and they wouldn't have made more money. So be aware of that. This next one, I'm going to skip what we had there, Mike. I'm going to go to the next one about having the lowest price does not guarantee sales. The myth is that having the lowest price guarantees sales. And I strongly am against this one. I don't believe this to be true. The race to the bottom does not guarantee you sales. There's so much other factors that play a role Your feedback plays a role, the quality of your pictures, your return policy, your customer service. Are you a top rated seller? Do you sell international? There are so many other things. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm not going to do anything, but I'm just going to have the cheapest price, chances are if you consistently selling through all your inventory, I think you're gonna have a hard time, and you're also throwing away money.
Even location makes a difference, right? Like we talked about specifically like shipping prices. Like if now that I'm in like the middle of the country, I'm in Texas, it's a little bit easier for me to reach both coasts than when I was on the West Coast to try and reach the East Coast. And some people have said, and I haven't looked into it a ton, but that eBay probably even puts stuff regionally, right? So like if you're in that area, they're probably more likely to show you stuff in that area because it's going to ship the fastest to you. So you might your listing might show up at some point, maybe 2 or 3 pages down if you're the cheapest, but unless they're specifically sorting for lowest price, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the sell for sure. There's a lot of other reasons why other people's listings are going to show up on top, or that a customer is going to have more confidence going with a different seller than you.
Yeah, and there's a value proposition, right? People see you're the cheapest, and people begin to go like, why is that the cheapest, right? It happens to me all the time when I'm out sourcing, not sourcing, when I'm trying to buy for myself, and I'm going on eBay, and I'm like, oh, and usually I am right. Like I'll look, and it's like there's a tear that they didn't list, or there's some kind of issues. There's a mistrust. But when you're kind of middle of the road pricing, I do think that is the best place to be. And again, you want to be able to send offers and accept offers, which also helps you in the algorithm. And you want to be able to run sales, which also helps you in the algorithm. So if all you're doing is setting the lowest price, you're not running sales, you're not accepting offers, you're not, doing any of that, chances are that you're not going to end up on the first page. So be aware of that. All right, this next one here. I am trying to work on this, and it's the fact that just because you have larger inventory does not mean you're going to be a successful reseller. Right now, I think the hardest reality for a lot of people like me and others that have 5,000, 10,000, 30,000 items has been that either one, we sourced a ton of stuff at one point in time that was valuable and we didn't sell it through, and now it just sits in our store and it's weighing down our store, or we continue to pick up those same kind of items and we have a huge inventory and we're just not making sales. And I can tell you, I know people that have less than 1,000 items in their eBay store, and they easily make in the higher 6 figures. And I can tell you people that have 10, 20, 30,000 items in their store, and they're making less than 6 figures a year despite having a larger inventory. So don't get caught in that trap that, hey, I just need to build my store once I get to 3,000 listings. The best scenario you can be in is that you keep trying to get a bigger store, but you keep selling so much that you can't make it. Like, that is a beautiful place to be in. Don't see that as a place of you're losing, you're not making it happen. I would argue that you're actually making it happen if you can never hit that number because you keep getting sales. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's good.
All right, and then you want to tackle this last one here?
The last one, number 10, reselling is just a passing fad. I don't know if anybody fully believes that. I mean, I do.
You
think
don't think so?
I think it goes back a little bit to what we talked about earlier. I do think there's an element of people who get excited about it, who jump on because like, hey, this is quick money, and then they jump out. So it is a passing fad for a lot of people, right? But as far as just reselling in general, I mean, reselling has been here since the time the first item sold. Reselling pretty much existed, right? Because we've always had either some kind of a trade and barter system, and so it's not going away. It's going to change a lot. Like, it's going to consistently change. Like, reselling today looks a lot different than it did 50 years ago, than it did 100 years ago, than it did 500 years ago. But there's always reselling, and so the key is can you adapt with the changes? Can you adapt with the new technology? You can't be that person who's just like, I want it to be the way it's always been, because you're going to get left in the dust. But it's definitely not a passing fad. I do think that we can take some comfort in the fact, though, that if you're concerned about competitors, it is a passing fad for a lot of those competitors. Like, they get into it, they might just start it, they might try it, and then they don't stick around. Or even with, I think what is a passing fad is a lot of the grifting that happens on social media, because there are incredible reselling channels and podcasts and YouTube channels and Instagram channels, all of those things. But then there's also the grifters, right? There's the people who they jump in on TikTok, try to make a quick buck off of selling an idea that's not really a good one because they don't really know what they're talking about. And then they're moving on to the next fad. So I do think that some of that grifting is probably going to die down, which will make it seem a little bit less like there's competition for us as time goes. But no, reselling is here to stay until there's no more items to be sold in the first place.
Okay. And I want to add a little bit of that to the idea that reselling isn't something that you have to kind of like just say, no, I'm not going to resell anymore, or I'm going to resell. I think you can adapt, right, based on your lifestyle. Right? Mike and I have talked about this many times, but I'm really experiencing this right now as I'm moving to get back into full-time education. And I'm looking at my eBay inventory, and there was a moment in time where I'm like, you know what, maybe this is the end of reselling. But then, and that was a very short, I was like maybe 3 seconds I thought about that. Okay. But then I realized like reselling is the reason I'm still able to enjoy a pretty good life, right? I'm not super wealthy, but I'm also, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. And the reason being is because of reselling, right? That, hey, as a full-time reseller, things were really good. But at the same time, now that I'm full-time, I got more expenses, right? And I have to cover those expenses, especially because I'm moving to the Bay Area and it's more expensive. But guess what? Because of reselling, I'm able to get a decent place to live. Because of reselling, I'm able to enjoy my time out there without stressing because it is more expensive. Because of reselling, I've actually been able to show higher income than if I just had a W-2 to show, right? And then what's going to be great is my son's in college and I can help my son with college. And he actually will be home in the summer and he'll be reselling too. And so you don't have to give up on reselling just because you end up going back to full-time. You don't have to give up on reselling just because, hey, an opportunity arose and now you're like, hey, I really don't need to resell anymore. I think it's something you should always do. I think even if you just do it as a side hobby, just because it's fun. I mean, I know people, I remember I shared this many times, how I've been to places like where there's other heads of school they're pretty well off. I mean, we're talking about schools that probably pay them in the high six figures, and they're like, oh, I love going to garage sales. I mean, Gary Vee loves going to garage sales, and the guy's a multimillionaire, right? And the fact about reselling is that you can adapt reselling to any stage in life. So it's not this zero-sum game where you just have to give it up and it's over. Like, there is an opportunity to continue reselling regardless of your circumstance. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. I always appreciate every single one of you. If you haven't checked out our Patreon, please do so. Patreon.com/PureHustle Hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and thank you to everyone listening on the podcast. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Peace.
From garage sales to thrift store aisles, we hunt for treasure, stacking them in piles. Hustling hard, making deals all day, flipping finds, turning profit our way. You hustle